think what's interesting about what happened in Denver is that it was a directed investigation. So this is something that was done at the department's investigation, to the best of my understanding. And I think this really, it was a high-profile investigation. And I think what is intended to do is to send a signal to families that obviously there's a new sheriff in town. This is a priority. This administration, as the executive orders have made clear, actually views the difference in the sexes to be significant. Their interpretation of Title IX is that it does provide for female-only spaces. And over the past several years, my organization, Parents Defending Education, has been working to educate parents just about OCR complaints in general, how to file them, how the process works. And so I think we are likely to see parents who will then avail themselves of this procedure going forward. We have seen, I mean, over the past several years from coast to coast, there have been walkouts. There have been, I think in Pennsylvania, it was one that I think of where girls have kind of walked out en masse. You know, for far too long, girls have basically been othered and told, well, if you're uncomfortable, you can go to use the single stall restroom in the nurse's room or something like that. And so for this to be a very clear signal to families, to students, that if your school has engaged in something similar, this is something that the department is interested in looking into and adjudicating, I think is something that families are going to be really encouraged by. Parents are overjoyed. We work with about 350 parent groups across the country, as well as thousands of individual activists, grandparents, parents. And this is a real vindication of their efforts over the past 4 years. I mean, we have been gaslit by our states, by our local school districts, by the federal government, being, called names, smeared, told we're transphobic, haters, bigots, because we want our children to have a colorblind education, because we want our children to be protected or feel safe and have privacy in bathrooms and locker rooms. And so for this to be a priority of the administration, I think really sets the tone from the top down. And so people are delighted. I think a lot of people are still trying to figure out what this means for them in their district, in their backyard, so that they know, if they see something, they can say something and where to report it to ensure that there is actually compliance with the law going forward. So I think we're going to start to see the agencies then start to reach out to the state education agencies, the local education agencies. I mean, virtually every school in America, both primary, secondary, post-secondary, receives federal funding. And accordingly, they all should have been in compliance with the law as far as admissions go. You shouldn't be admitting students or having quotas on the basis of race. You shouldn't be treating students differently on the basis of race. You shouldn't be treating students differently on the basis of sex. And so, to the extent where it's just encouraging students to actually comply with the law, I think that's a great thing. Sadly, what PDE has found is that many schools are not. Many schools have taken their marching orders from the Biden administration. That day one executive order that the Biden administration signed injected equity into absolutely everything. And so districts realized it was a greater risk for them to not have DEI policies in place than to actually follow civil rights law as it was written and intended. So there are hundreds, thousands of schools across the country that have not been doing that. And so I think we're watching in real time districts, organizations, even private corporations, right, start to pull down policies from their pages, from their websites. But there are, I have no doubt, districts, schools, universities that are either not going to comply or are going to just try and do a cosmetic rebrand, a DEI department maybe becoming a belonging department or something like that. And so there will be sort of the initial rush of activity, and then there's going to have to be a lot of watchdogging and cleanup, frankly, I think. I have no doubt that these executive orders and then the successive implementation is going to be challenged in court, and so we'll watch that play out across the country as well. But at the end of the day, the U.S. Constitution and the 14th Amendment provides for a colorblind society, and to get back to that is something that is sorely overdue. The Department of Education provides, at the moment, they're doing a lot of duplicative processes that, frankly, are probably best shuttled off to other cabinet agencies. Things like student loans, FAFSA. We have seen that horribly mismanaged by the Department of Education. Is that something that would probably be better performed by the Treasury Department? Almost certainly. There is an Office for Civil Rights at both the Department of Justice as well as the Department of Education. Why are there two sets of them? I mean, as we look to streamline and cut things through DOJ, et cetera, I think there's a real opportunity to make sure that the department is focusing on the things it should be, which is educating children, restoring trust in the system, and not doing things like giving out the $1 billion in DEI-focused grants that PDE had identified, because federal money comes with strings, and we have seen the Biden people weaponize those strings in the past. And so to the extent where we can just frankly shrink the size and scope of the Department of Education on the way to, abolishing the department or not, I think is something that would benefit the American people. These are things that are best left to the state and local level. I mean, education is fundamentally something that was never intended to be a federal matter. And so states understand their communities, localities, school districts, know their communities, their needs, their values better than anybody in Washington ever can or would.